So today I'll be talking about what is the hypothalamus. So what is the hypothalamus? Well, the hypothalamus is a part of the brain, and it's part of a system we call the limbic system that regulates emotions, memory, and behavior. And the hypothalamus means below the thalamus, and it's below the thalamus. It's this green part over here, and the thalamus is this brown circle here. So, what are the functions of the hypothalamus? Well, the first and most important function is homeostasis. So, homeostasis is regulating an internal environment, regulating the body functions. So, one such thing that you need to regulate is temperature. The temperature in your body has to always be 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius. Another thing that needs to be regulated is blood pressure. So now you're wondering, how does the hypothalamus do all of this? Well, it's all up to the hormones. So the hormones, they're like signals or messages. And what the hormones do is they are produced and are sent to a particular part of the body, and they tell what that particular part must do. And they're produced by parts we call glands, which produce hormones. And there are many glands across the body, and one such gland is the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland is located in the brain, right below the hypothalamus, and it's called the master gland sometimes because it controls all the other glands in the body. And it produces the most hormones than any other part of the body, any other gland. So the hypothalamus is sometimes called a gland too because it produces hormones, but it's also part of the limbic system, so it's sometimes not called as a gland. And the hypothalamus and pituitary gland often collaborate in homeostasis. So now let's think of what happens, how the hypothalamus regulates temperature. So our first example is when the temperature is too cold. So say this is our blood vessel, and there's blood cells flowing in it. And when the temperature is too cold, what happens is a signal comes to the blood vessel from the brain, the hypothalamus, saying, please go contract or go smaller so we can keep the heat. So what happens is that it gets smaller, and it also keeps the heat from going away. And another thing that happens is the hypothalamus makes you shiver. It'll make you shiver, so then the muscles are moving, which produces heat. Now, our next example is when the temperature is too warm. So this is our blood vessel again. And when the temperature is too warm, what happens is the blood vessel expands. And this allows more heat to go away get out of the blood vessel, which makes it cooler. And another thing that the hypothalamus will do is it will call the sweat glands and say, hey, can you go and produce some sweat? And the sweat glands will do exactly that. And sweat cools the skin. So, now it's fun fact time. And our fun fact is, did you know that the hypothalamus is only the size of a pea? So, back to our hypothalamus. So, there's more functions than just homeostasis. The hypothalamus is also important for emotional responses, and that's what makes it part of the limbic system. Another thing is stress control, and it's also important for appetite. So now, let's talk about the anatomy of the hypothalamus. So this is our hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus is located here, and it's that looks like a tooth, but let's just use a circle just so you get the idea of the parts of the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is divided into three regions, which are the anterior region, the middle region, and the posterior region. So this side is front, as this arrow shows. That way is the front side, and this way is the back side. So now we'll be talking about the complex names of these parts right now. For example, anterior, middle, and posterior. But I just want to say what a nucleus is, and that's an important thing we'll be talking about because all the parts will be called nuclei. And a nucleus, you probably do know, is the nucleus of an atom or the nucleus of a cell. But the nucleus we're talking about is a cluster of neurons in the brain. So now let's talk about the anatomical terms of location. So this is my sheet, and I'll talk about all the ones we need to know. So the first one is dorsal, which means related to the back. Then we have ventral, which means related to the front. We have anterior, which means related to the front. And posterior, which means related to the back. Now, dorsal and posterior and ventral and anterior seem to be the same, and they are the same in us human anatomy, but they are different in the anatomy of animals. So, for example, say we are talking about a horse. So this is a posterior view of a horse. And this is a dorsal view of a horse. So as you can see, here we're looking at a back view. So a posterior means a back view, but dorsal means literally our back. So in a human, the back is the same as back view. But in a horse, the back is on the top. So it would be kind of like a top view. So that's the difference between dorsal and posterior, and the same goes with ventral and anterior. So now we have lateral, which means related to the side, and medial, which means related to the middle. So back to our anatomy. We have anterior, which means on the front, so this side is the front side, and posterior, which means the back, so this is the back side. Now we can divide the anterior region into more nuclei, which are these are the nuclei. So now I'll talk about each and every one. So first let's label this. This is the preoptic nuclei, this red part. We have the anterior hypothalamic nucleus, the paraventricular nucleus, the supraoptic nucleus, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, over there, this is the blue thing, the dorsal medial nucleus, which is this green part, the ventral medial nucleus, the Alterate Nucleus, the mammillary nucleus, the lateral nucleus, and the posterior nucleus. So if you watched my amygdala video and my thalamus video, you probably have heard about the lateral nucleus, but this is a different one. So now it's fun fact time! And the fun fact for now is, did you know that the hypothalamus tells you when you're hungry? So the stomach will send a signal straight to the hypothalamus saying, well, I feel hungry. So now, let's talk about each and every nucleus and its functions. So first we'll be talking about the preoptic nucleus, which is this red part over here. And the preoptic nucleus is important for detecting whether temperatures are low or too high. So that's what we call thermoregulation. So it's basically detecting whether it's low. Not solving the problem, but just detecting. The next part is the supraoptic nucleus. And that's this yellow part over here. And it's important for decreasing the amount of water in your pee. So actually in your pee there's 90% water. So the supraoptic nucleus just decreases that because you're wasting water when you have so much water in your pee. So the supraoptic nucleus also produces vasopressin, which is the hormone that helps decrease the amount of water. The next part is the paraventricular nucleus, and that's this tan part over here. And it's important for the release of vasopressin and a lot of other hormones. We also have the anterior hypothalamic nucleus, which is important for eating yummy food. And eating is basically the feeling that you want to eat, that hunger. You could think of hunger as that. Sweating is also an example. So sweating is also when it's like the thing, as I said, when you want to call the sweat glands to go and release your sweat. That's also a job of the anterior hypothalamic nucleus. Panting is also. So, now let's talk about the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And that's this blue part over here. And it's important for our circadian rhythm. So our circadian rhythm is like knowing when to sleep, when to wake up, and that. The next part is the dorsal medial nucleus, which is this dark green part over here, and it's important for regulating the blood pressure. The next is the ventricular medial, which is this brown part. It's important for the feeling of being full. So if you have eaten a lot of food, the feeling of being full or satiated. So the next part is the Alterate Nucleus, which is over here, and it's important for the growth hormone. We have the mammillary nucleus, which is important for memory. Now it's not involved in all of memory, but it helps the other parts of the limbic system, like the thalamus and the amygdala, do their job in memory. Now we have the posterior nucleus, the blue part over here, and it's important for increasing your blood pressure. It's also important for shivering. So our last part is the lateral nucleus, and it's important for orexin neurons. So orexin neurons are like these multifunction neurons which work a lot in the unconscious parts of the brain. So by unconscious, I mean stuff that you don't think of doing, like heart beating and your digestive system working and your lungs breathing, that kind of stuff. So those are the parts of the brain, the parts of the hypothalamus. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and you can watch my amygdala video over here and my thalamus video over here. Bye!